Hello everybody, and welcome to what might be one of my most exciting versions of the Sam's Report that I've been waiting to talk about for a long time now. Surface Book 2. It's finally here. It's here. Okay, qualifier. This is not a Surface Book 2, but you would have probably no idea if it actually wasn't, unless I turned it and showed you off a few key features of it, if I can get my sayings there right. But I've got all the details. I was in New York. They announced it at a kind of a private event. Some of you guys were catching on that there were a lot of journalists in New York City last week. Yeah, we were there. I chatted with Panos. I chatted with a whole bunch of different Microsoft execs and got the dirty details on this thing. So, Surface Book 2. We're going to run through it quick here. I've got a bunch of pictures and kind of hands-on stuff with it. And so, the two things you need to know, it's coming in two varieties now. Two varieties, Surface Book 2. It's coming in a 13-inch, which is what the old one was, and a brand new 15-inch. In this 15-inch, it is delightful. Let's, I think I've got a size comparison pic here. Let's see. Yeah, so there you go. You can see the 13-inch next to the 15-inch. The 15-inch is large. I mean, there's no denying it, but it is a beautiful machine. It is just like the 13-inch, but bigger. So if you looked at your 13-inch Surface Book, like, I'd love this thing if it was just a little bigger. Microsoft has it. They've actually said they've been working on this thing ever since they announced the 13-inch. So this was always in the pipeline, and it was coming. And so breaking down those 15-inch delicious specifications, it's a 15-inch display, pixel sense, of course, 3240 by 2160, which gives you about 260 ppi, 16,000 to 1 contrast ratio, of course, 10-point multi-touch, and it's going to be compatible with that next gen Microsoft pen that they've come out with. Here's another little look. So this is actually my Surface Book on top of the 15-inch. I'm surprised they let me do this. I was like, can I put mine on top? And like, yeah. And so there's a very good look at how much bigger it actually is. And on the inside of the 15-inch, so there is some difference between the internals of the 15-inch and the 13-inch. On the inside of the 15-inch, you are going to get an 8th gen Intel quad-core 8650U processor with up to 4.2 gigahertz max turbo and 16 gigs of RAM. The only differentiation in the specs that you can get on the 15-inch is the amount of storage. Everything is coming with that same processor and 16 gigs of RAM, but 256 gig of storage all the way up to 1 terabyte, and there you go. And so also getting a bump is the graphics card. The graphics card was a little bit dated in the old one. Let's see here. We got a bunch of kind of side-by-side pics for you guys. And so they're bumping it up to the GTX 1060 discrete GPU with 6 gigabytes of GDDR5. This thing is a beast. There is no question about it. This thing is going to be a mobile powerhouse by all accounts. And here you can kind of see the different sides. And on the ports, you'll notice if you're looking real carefully here, remember on that top and bottom one in the top right corner that you see there, that is mine on top. It is actually coming with a USB Type-C port. Ta-da! Like, that's great news. The problem is it's not Thunderbolt Type-C, so it's like womp womp womp. You can actually see basically they're doing it as the display out. The mini display port is now gone. It's still going to use the Surface Blade to charge, but Microsoft tells me that if you have a USB Type-C charger, you can trickle charge your machine. So it is technically possible to charge this thing with USB Type-C, but I wouldn't recommend it because the Blade charger, the classic Surface charger, let me pull up the spec here. I believe it's 95 watt. Yeah, it's a 95 watt Surface charger. You're going to struggle to get anything close to that with a Type-C. So you've got that going on. And the older style charger, which is going to come with the i5, the 13-inch, by the way. So let's break down the 13-inch specs because it is important. So the 13-inch will start at, I believe, $1,400 with an i5 processor. Now, this is not an 8th gen i5. This is the lowest of the low. Surface Book entry points will be the 7th gen Core i5 with 8 gigs of RAM and no discrete graphics, and it'll basically use the Intel HD 620 integrated graphics as the primary graphic, well, the only one. But the 13-inch, then you can jump up to the same 8th gen Core i7 8650U processor with 8 or 16 gigs of RAM, and again, the same types of storage options, 256, 512, or 1 terabyte. So there's quite a bit of flexibility there, but the discrete graphics is only a GTX 1050. So really, if you're looking to max out your Surface Book badassness or whatever you want to call it, you're going to have to go with the 15-inch to get that NVIDIA 1060. Not saying that the 13-inch is any slouch by any means, but it's really just kind of an internal upgrade. But the 15-inch is clearly getting a lot more power, And speaking of power, what about power consumption? Microsoft, now take this with a grain of salt. Microsoft is saying 17 hours of battery life. Now that's 17 hours of video playback. My gut tells me that once I get my hands on one of these things, which I don't have yet, I don't know if anybody does yet, it's going to be closer to like 8 to 10 hours would be my guess, which is solid battery life, but it's a far cry from that 17 just because that 17 is just video playback, which I know can be strenuous on a machine, but it's not real world. It's not a great benchmark. I've never been a big fan of Microsoft doing that. Both machines will ship with 64-bit versions of Windows 10 Pro and the Creators Update. Surprisingly, not the Fall Creators Update, and this machine will be available next month. So there you go. The Surface Book 2, playing with it hands-on, I mean, it feels great. Microsoft actually did some, I think I've got another picture here of the latch. Yeah. So Microsoft actually did some refinements to the hinge. The iconic kind of, iconic if you, whatever you want to call it, that teardrop style hinge is not going away despite the rumors. Also the rumors saying that there was going to be a black one. No such black one, at least not that they showed off. They did do some refinements to the hinge. Microsoft said it should now be more reliable. But in this next picture, I believe, do I have another picture of it somewhere? Well, we'll jump back here to the 4. If you look in that bottom right corner, so that is my 13-inch Surface Book on top of a 15-inch. You'll notice that the pegs that the display sits in on the 15-inch, they're a little bit narrower. It's kind of hard to see in this picture, but they're actually taller. And so Microsoft says, hey, that gives it much better stability. They also claim that there's better weight distribution, so you're going to have better, less of that screen wobble as well. And the machine feels great. It's just a Surface Book that we know and love, and it's been exploded in size in every dimension. I mean, it's got more power, it's got more battery life, it's got a better hinge. The trackpad, I mean, the keyboard are relatively the same. There is some minor differences on the keyboard. They've changed the font of that top row that has like the play, pause, and all that kind of stuff. It now matches that of the Surface laptop. No big deal there, but same key travel. I mean, it feels like a great machine. I'm really excited about this machine. Microsoft did a good job of keeping it kind of off the radar. I'll tell you a little bit more about that, because if you went back, and I'm sure I'll tweet this out because I was right. So if you go back, I actually said that, hey, Microsoft is going to have an event in October, and other people were saying, no, it's going to be delayed until whenever. And I was like, I said that, and then I kind of just stopped talking about it because Microsoft told me to shut up through some agreements and documentation that I signed. But I was like, hey, there's going to be an event, and lo and behold, there was an event. It just wasn't a public event. And so other things that Microsoft had at this event, they were showing off their VR, AR stuff. Panos was there answering questions. You know, they were just kind of showing off what they've got. Nothing about Redstone 4, by the way. They did talk a lot about the Fall Creators Update, but that was all old news to anybody who's on an insider build. And so this machine, it's looking good. I'm a little disappointed it doesn't have Thunderbolt in it, but at least they're finally showing that, hey, we are going to support USB Type-C. And yeah, it's going to be a good machine. And this completes Microsoft's basic complement of all of the Apple hardware at the end of the day. If you think about it, Microsoft now has their MacBook Air. They have a Surface laptop, or whatever, their MacBook line. Their MacBook Pro, they now match in both 13 and 15 inch. Their iPad Pro is the Surface Pro. Microsoft has now completed that complement. Of course, they don't have a mobile, which was the Band, or a mobile wearable, which was the Band, and then they don't have a phone, which was their Lumia, but they essentially replicated that model. And these things, I'm just going to pull them back up because they're nice. Like that 15 inch kind of came out of nowhere. I know Walking Cat had a good tip about it, but this is what you guys need to know. It's coming soon, and I'm personally excited. I wish that we would have seen things in like the burgundy or cobalt color, because it does look kind of bland. It's got that metallic look. It's fine. It's made great hardware. I mean, I have used this Surface Book performance base every trip I've taken since December of last year, and it's held up exceptionally well. So I'm not really worried about the long-term durability of this thing. And so maybe Microsoft didn't want to do that, or they want to differentiate with colors on their more consumer line, because this is definitely a professional grade product. I mean, this thing will be worth or cost several thousands of dollars when it's it'll cost several thousands of dollars. Let's just throw it that way. Basically, whatever your heart can desire at this point. And so there's one major flaw that Microsoft did with this, and I pointed out to them, and they kind of like, they had to have talked about this. So the one major flaw with the Surface Book 2 has nothing to do with the hardware. It has everything to do with the branding. So if you go back to earlier this year when they announced the Surface Pro, they announced the Surface, they had the Surface Pro, they had Surface Pro 2, Surface Pro 3, Surface Pro 4, and they said, you know what, we're getting rid of numbers and we're going to have just Surface Pro. They didn't want to name it Surface Pro 5, they just named it Surface Pro. And then they come out with the Surface Book, which is kind of almost like the third version, because the performance space, you could argue, is like 1.5, or maybe that was Surface Book 2. But they're not, they should have just called this thing Surface Book. They were on this path to having just nice products. It's just a Surface laptop. It's a Surface Pro, and now they have Surface Book 2. It's like, guys, come on. They should have just called this thing Surface Book and then just denoted it by the year 2017, exactly like Apple does. You copy them every other way, but now you have this misaligned marketing push. And so obviously I'm recording this before the announcement. If they changed it up last minute, I'll eat a hat, but I sincerely doubt they're not doing that based on all the materials they've sent over. And so that's it, folks. Surface Book 2 now coming in the 13-inch, which we all knew, and now the 15-inch, and it's just an overhaul of the internals. The exterior, unless you have a very sharp eye to spot that USB Type-C or potentially the larger size, you wouldn't be able to know the difference. And so they're sticking to that tried and true formula. The teardrop little gap is still there. They're not getting rid of that. They love it personally. Maybe in another revision they'll get rid of it or something, but not happening this time around. And so this model is going to be here for a little bit. And if you've been on the fence about buying a Surface Book, this is basically the best time to do it. You can either try to grab that value purchase of the last gen, which I probably don't recommend at this point, or go ahead and grab that quad core now, because it's here. It's the 8th gen stuff. It's going to be good. And that's the Surface Book 2. If you have any questions, feel free to shout at me on Twitter. Is probably the best way to find me, at BDSams. But this has been everything you need to know that we know about today of the Surface Book 2. Thanks for tuning in.